Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our next installment of 20 Minutes for Israel from Israel. I appreciate everyone who's joining us as we transition to the Chag, the holiday here in America. We are joined today by Yitzchak Spodek, who is a recent IDF soldier. He's currently back in the States. I reached out to Yitzchak to share with us a little about his commander, as his commander was unfortunately one of the heroes who have fallen in Gaza. And we'll hear a little bit more about him and his life. And I think also it's a symbol of the diversity of the Israeli people. We think about Israel and we talk about our brothers and sisters who are Jews, but it's important to recognize that we have brothers and sisters in Israel of all different faiths, of Muslims, of Christians, and of Druze. This is a perfect example, I believe, of that. Yitzchak, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
If you could just start, this is a moment where we connect to stories and things in Israel. Tell us a little about, you grew up in Boca Raton, and then you decided to join the army. Tell us a little about just your journey there.
Yeah, I grew up in Boca Raton, Florida, but I was born in Israel. I lived there till I was 3, so I do hold Israeli citizenship, and really always in the back of my mind to join the army, even from when I was a little kid. And when the time came for me to go spend a year at Israel for yeshiva, I made the decision to actively pursue army during that year. I went to a lot of different training opportunities that they have for lone soldiers and went to as many informational sessions and classes as I could, and decided that I was going to draft. I figured out where I wanted to go. I wanted to be a paratrooper. And in the end, I drafted in December of 2019 into the Army. I did a 3-month Hebrew course. And then in March of 2020, I drafted into the 101st Paratrooper Brigade in the IDF. I did a 1.5-year service there. And training is 8 months, and the second half of my training, the last 4 months of training, which is the more intensive portion of my training, where you really learn operational duties and really how to fight in both urban and mountainous ranges in Israel. Jamals was my commander. He was my commanding officer for that time. So he was in charge of my machlaka, my tzevet of 30 guys. He was our commanding officer.
So what, and I assume there are members of your unit that have been called up also now.
Yeah, everybody from my unit was called up. Everyone is serving in different areas of the country right now. I actually did a trip to Israel myself a few weeks ago and was able to go visit a lot of my friends. They were up north. Now they're down south. They're preparing to enter Gaza. So everyone's spread out, everyone's doing what they can, but everyone at this point has been called up.
All right. So tell us a little bit about Major Abbas, who was the fallen soldier who we're talking about. I understand he was a member of the Druze community, right?
Yes, he was. Jamal, he's a special person. He grew up in a military family. His father and his brothers were all and are currently still in lots of different special forces units, and they're high-ranking officers in the army. And he basically grew up on military bases throughout his life, and he knew from the very beginning that that's the path he was going to take. It wasn't even a question for him. He's Druze. Does that mean he doesn't serve? It wasn't even a question. He put his whole heart into it. He did that at the beginning of his service when he was just learning, and he did that most definitely while he was training me, and I'm sure he was doing that at the end of his service as well. We spent close to a year together, Jamal and I, and the first 4 months of it, like I said, we're training. So he was less of a friend and a brother, and more of a leader and an officer. But after that, I got to get to know him a little bit better as a brother and as a friend. and he's a special person. He was by far the hardest working person I knew in the army. I remember a story one time we were doing one of our marches. The army loves doing marches for soldiers, and we were doing one of our marches, and it was about maybe a 45 kilometer march. And at one point in the middle of the night, we were going through this mountain range, and my leg had cramped up, so I had fallen a little bit behind. And Jamal had realized that, and he ran back, and he, with his gear on his back and my gear on my back, threw me over his shoulder and ran me to the front of the line, and said, "Okay, now let's keep going." So he was that kind of person. He was always there for his soldiers. He was always looking out for everyone, making sure that everybody was doing as best as they possibly could. He was a special person. He was definitely a special person. There was never any, I never looked at him as if like, oh, I'm Jewish and you're Druze. There was like, it wasn't even a question. It was just, he was an officer, somebody who I looked up to. There was nothing else. That's who he was. That's the kind of person who he was. That's the kind of persona he gave off.
What was his thought? Seeing this kid who grew up in America. I know your grandmother's joining from Israel. We're honored to have her on. To now then come back and serve in the army. I imagine also when you're referring to the 4 months and the rest of the service, even in your advanced training, there's what in the army they refer to as distance, right?
Yes.
Distance.
Yeah.
You want to describe just a little bit for people who are just understand a little bit what that looks like?
Sure. So during training in the army, there's this thing called distance between you and your commanders, where basically it's as if you would imagine they're a high-ranking officer, and they're of a higher rank than you are, so you have to give them that respect. You can't really refer to them by their first name so much. You really call them commander. And there's just different ways within interacting with them. You don't really have a say in what they say. What they say goes. There's no really communications to be had. They're there to train you, and you're there to listen to whatever they tell you to do. Once training's over, that sort of distance breaks down. They still are a higher rank than you, but they're there to pursue the same goal as you. They're no longer there to train you. They're there to fight alongside you. So once you finish training, that distance breaks down. And, obviously you can call them by their first name, and you can ask them questions and say, hey, I think we might be able to do this, or, hey, I disagree with that, or whatever it is. Speak to them like they're your brother, like they're your fellow fighter in arms together.
I think what's fascinating is you're saying, oh, it's obvious that you should call them by their first name after that point. In any other army in the world, the first part, the distance part, that's the way it is throughout the army. Right? You have Correct. An officer, they eat in different this, they're totally different. One of the things that is so remarkable about the IDF is that after that training component goes on, right, after that sort of discipline, there's an idea that this distance drops, and then you become sort of as equals. Even there's obviously a chain of command, but that sort of collaborative spirit.
But that's something that Jamal really encompassed and embodied. That idea that while he was the leader, and we looked up to him to make those leadership decisions and to sort of guide us for whatever we were doing, whether it would be for going on a rest in Hebron, or we were in the middle of a practice mission up north, whatever we were doing. We looked to him to make those leadership decisions. But at the end of the day, he wasn't like standing in the back and telling us do this or do that. He was standing right next to me, and he was doing the same exact thing that I was doing. And he was the first one into the house, and he was leading the charge. So, that's ultimately what he was doing. When unfortunately he fell in God, that he was doing the same thing. He advanced in his rank when I met him, and when I knew him, he was the commander of our specific company, and then he became actually a platoon commander. So he was under the command. He was commanding and a commanding officer for over 100 soldiers at the time when he fell. So he just continued to rise in the ranks, and embody that idea that he always wanted to be the first one in every door. He wanted to be the first one leading the charge whenever we were doing anything.
So going back to my what sort of led us into our distance question, what was sort of the interaction, either his impression or others when they saw this American come back and serve in the army?
So it they're surprised, but they're also not. So it's like it's a loaded question. They a lot. I got at the beginning of my service. I got a lot of questions. Like, what are you doing here? You could be in college, having the time of your life in America right now. The Israelis, they really think of America as the end all be all. They're like, that place is just incredible. And I'm like, guys, I'm telling you, you have it better in Israel. Trust me. It's much better there. But they look at it as, how can you be here doing this? Why do you want to be spending weeks out in the wilderness surviving with us and putting your life on the line when you can just be living the good life in America? So I got a few of those questions at the beginning of my service and occasionally throughout my service when I met new people. But I think that, my simple answer to anyone who really asked me was, I'm Israeli, you're Israeli, we're no different just because I live in America. So I'm here to do the same job that you're here to do. And let's just do it together. I think that, and there was, they gave me a lot of respect for that. And I respected them a lot for, trusting me and understanding that I was there to do the same thing. I wasn't just there, to have a good time and take some pictures. I was there to, do the job that needed to be done. I think that's what every lone soldier who goes to Israel is there to do. And I respected them a lot for putting their trust in me and treating me as an equal. So there were definitely some questions at the beginning, but I think that, once they got to know me and I got to know them, there was a mutual understanding and respect and trust that we all learned from each other.
Were there any, you shared one story about how he carried you. Are there any sort of stories that stick out that you want to share?
About Jamal or just my service in general?
About Jamal or about your service in general?
Another story about Jamal was, during training, we did jump school because we were in the paratroopers. So we jumped out of a plane a few times. And during the 2-week period of jump school, there usually is a lax in the discipline that goes on. So you're able to have your phones on you, which you're not able to do during your training normally. And there are a couple other things that were more relaxed. And at one point, Jamal got upset at us for doing something that we thought was okay and he thought wasn't. And there was this whole argument that ensued. And, there was someone yelled at one person, somebody yelled at the other person. But after things died down, the next morning he called everyone together and he got us all together. And, he apologized to everyone for yelling and for not, for just calling people out in specific. And I think, that really showed his character and his leadership ability, that while he was a leader and while we were the ones that, were looking up to him to make those kind of decisions, he was still able to understand and appreciate that, what we were doing and what we were there for at the end of the day was all the same goal. And he was able to come over to us and say, guys, I made a mistake here. Let's talk about this. Let's work through it together. And that really was echoed throughout his entire service, at least when I was with him. This idea of, working as a team. He never was like, oh, I'm the commanding officer, so you do this. He was like, I have this training. I think that we might be able to do this, but what do you guys think? So, he really embodied that idea as, yeah, he was a leader, but he was a leader of a team and he was still part of that team.
Are there sort of life lessons that you picked up from him or through your Army service that you now carry forward?
There's many. There's many, a lot of just different things that you pick up throughout your service and things that I learned from him. One of the things that I definitely learned from him is just this idea of never giving up. He had this fighting spirit that no matter what was going on, no matter what the situation was, no matter how hard it got, he just gave his 100%, his all, and he expected his soldiers to do the same. And that was how his team was run. That's how he ran his team, and that's how I would like to move forward in life and eventually be able to do myself. Run a team like that, or just have that idea of just never giving up, always giving your 100%, no matter what the situation is. Because if you know that the goal you're working towards is worth it, then you just got to give your all. So that's definitely something that I that I gleaned from him. Just from my service in general, I would say it's the basics. You know, this idea of organization, of being specific, being on time, different lessons like that. Just appreciate the small things in life. You know, little things like having a pillow when you go to sleep, as opposed to just your M16. Um, Definitely, that's something that you would appreciate. Never say no to your mom's cooking because you don't know when you get to have that. So always say yes to that. Yeah, just to
It's,
name a few.
our time is winding up. Any
Okay.
other impressions about Jamal? For those of us, this is probably the closest many people who are watching this or listening will come to knowing him, but really knowing anyone part of the Druze people. Any other sort of impressions about him, about the way he lived, either in the army or out of the army, that you can share?
Um, I think just to go back on what I said before, that he really, really, really respected and trusted his team. And he treated us like equals. Even when we got together outside of being in the army, you know, if we got a weekend off and the boys wanted to do something together, you know, he would want to be a part of it. He would join, he would come, and he would have just a good time, and he would mess around with everyone. You know, at the end of the day, we're young. You know, Jamal and I are actually the exact same age. We share the exact same birthday. So, you know, he would be turning 24 in just a few days, just like I am. So, you know, he's when we went out and we outside of the army, we just tried to, you know, have a good time and be with each other. And he sort of embodied that idea of, you know, as a team, while we're together and we're on mission, everything is going to be super important and we're going to be super focused, but we're allowed to, you know, come out and have a good time when we're not on mission. We're able to just be with each other. And he was never one to shy away from hanging out with anyone or, you know, not wanting to be a part of whatever was going on. So um, he was that kind of person. You know, he loved his family, he loved his soldiers, he loved his country. And you know, if that's the one lesson that I can leave you guys about Jamal, or the one thing, I think that would probably be the most important. That he loved everyone dearly. He never thought of anyone, no matter who they were, what they were doing, as different or as unequal. He viewed everyone as equals, and he tried to treat everyone as equals, um, which is something that I really respect from him, and something that I will try to learn from him as best as I can.
Awesome. It's like we so appreciate your time. I want to just end with one more question. You know, we're all following the news like you. Probably you have a little bit more of an inside track with people, knowing people there. But as you watch, you know, you have a little bit more of an understanding because of your experiences. But also being part of the American Jewish community, you understand our perspective and what we know and what we don't. What do you think we as American Jews committed deeply to helping support Israel, support her fighters, support her people, work to bring back the hostages? What I know it's probably a lot to ask, but what's the one thing that comes to mind that you think is really important for us to know?
I think the one thing in general that it's important to know is whatever you can do, no matter how little or how small or how big it is, helps. Really, really helps. When I was in Israel, I brought 40 duffel bags of the supplies over to different soldiers and different bases. And that supplies was hugely helpful, donated for my community. But we also just gave out letters that children in my community wrote to soldiers, saying that we were thinking of them and that we love them. And those letters were the things that really got to the soldiers. And it doesn't take a long time to write a letter, just a few words saying that we're thinking about them, that we love them. And full grown soldiers, full grown men and women in full tactical gear with their machine guns break down crying because of these people who are thinking of them in America. So no matter how small it is, no matter how insignificant you might think what you're doing is, everything that you do is helpful. And in Israel, they see and appreciate it all. So I think that from just the physical perspective, that's something that's really important. And if I may, from a religious perspective, I think that tefillah is just something that's the most important thing that we can do right now. At the end of my service, I was part of one of the last operations in Israel, Shomer Chomot, Guardian of the Walls. We were sent to northern Gaza for 3 weeks, and we had rockets, and we were attacked, and we were shelled and bombed, and throughout that entire time, there were people davening for us, there were people praying for us, and we had that invisible shield around us, and thankfully nobody was hurt, not a single person was injured, and I think that davening and tefillah have that great ability and power to protect our soldiers. So whatever opportunity you get, whether it be in shul or whether it be at home, whatever it is, if you can just speak from the heart and ask God to protect our soldiers, protect our people and our nation, it's immensely helpful, and it works, and it helps. So I think those are two different perspectives, but two equally important things that can be done right now as American Jews.
Excellent words. Wisdom way beyond your years. You made us all feel very old when you shared for your birthday. I will just add, I have the privilege of going to Israel on Sunday. If people want to write letters, I will be distributing them. I'm currently not in West Hartford now, but I will be back for Shabbat. I'll be back on Friday, and available to pick them up and get them from you either Friday or Saturday night. And I'd be honored to be your shliach, your messenger, to bring them to soldiers. And obviously, we don't have to go far to be able to daven and to make that meaningful opportunities to engage with the Almighty, which, as Yitzchak shared so eloquently, it was really an opportunity that we should never underestimate. Yitzchak, thank you so much for your service and your time and for joining us. Thank you, everyone, for taking a break today and taking 20 minutes for Israel from Israel. I wish you all a good Thanksgiving, and we will pick up again after this week.
Thank you.